Um,
Thank you for it.
while the room's filling in, I don't know if everyone here follows 301, or if you guys know what 301 is. I suggest everyone follows 301 during this discussion. But 301 is essentially a multimedia news company established by Armenians for Armenians. It's not funded by foreign NGOs. It's not funded by outside organizations. The point of 301, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, is to uh, share news about Armenia for Armenians, whether they're in the diaspora or in Armenia, that is aligned with Armenian interests and is not foreign propaganda, essentially. Um, if you have not been following 301 since the 2020 war, they had essentially minute by minute coverage of what was taking place during the war. After the war, it has expanded into covering news about Armenia, independent of military news. They've expanded into a separate military channel for those who are just trying to follow the military news, not just in Armenia, but worldwide. But the focus of 301 from the inception till today has been to provide reliable, um, fact checked information about what's taking place in Armenia and about Armenians. So if you don't already follow them, I suggest you do. It's a worthwhile follow and continued source of information. And I believe it's on every media platform. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Uh, uh, they might even have a Telegram. I can verify that. But the point is that 301 is a uh, Armenian interest news agency. And I believe a lot of people have come back in and joined. So we can continue with the discussion. Gav, you were giving us a little bit of background as to what's taking place right now and the general sentiment that you are seeing in Stepanakert. Yep.
Yes. So can you hear me clearly, Ada?
Crystal.
Okay, awesome. So, as I mentioned earlier, we've seen, acts of aggression and incursions into, not into, but we've seen, violence along the line of contact from places from Mardaget to Marduni. About 2-3 days ago, we've seen that escalate to a much higher degree. And specifically with the caliber of weaponry that's being used and the tactics. So, 2-3 days ago, they started using grenade launchers and UAVs, which are the drones. And that's when we've seen some of the highest rates of wounded among our soldiers. We've seen, unfortunately, we've had multiple casualties. And as of right now, the situation along the line of contact remains very tense. There's been a partial call to mobilization, which means that the army here in Artsakh has been calling up reservists and those who can fight. So I would say that, here there's preparation. Folks are getting ready no matter what the outcome is. In terms of what folks feel on the ground here in Artsakh, there is, somewhat concern. Everybody is vigilantly monitoring everything that's happening right now. But I would say at the same time, there is a sense of it's not all doom and gloom. I think yes, naturally people are worried, but from the folks that I've spoken to on the ground, people are ready, regardless of what the circumstances are, and they're preparing for what might happen. We're going to see in the next couple of days, I believe, how far that escalation is going to go. But the mindset here is one of preparation.
Before we continue on that note, Gev, I'd like to introduce you and Varujan one more time. Again, my name is Ara Krikorian. I'm the host moderating this discussion with Gev Iskadjan, who is located in Artsakh, and Varujan Keramian. I believe, Varujan, you're located in Yerevan.
Yes, yes.
And we heard a little bit from Gev, and we got a little the background of who he is and what he's doing in Artsakh, and with the ANC there. But we haven't heard from Varujan yet. Varujan is a PhD in Turkish studies. He's a Turkologist. And Varujan, if you could please give us a quick introduction of yourself.
Thank you again for having me and for organizing this discussion. I'm an associate professor at Yerevan State University, Faculty of Oriental Studies, and doing research and teaching on Turkey and Azerbaijan for already more than 10 years. And at the same time, I'm currently one of the co-founders of the Armenian Project Educational Scientific NGO, which tries to raise awareness about the most important issues in and around Armenia through the different public activities, from creating our own media platform called Haika Kanalik, which collaborates, by the way, with 301. And up to making research on the most important issues, etc. So this is very briefly.
Thank you, Varujan. And two more people that you definitely should be following, whether it's on Facebook, where I follow them, or on different platforms, are Gev Iskadjan and Varujan Keramian. They both put out constant content. Gev, I follow you on Twitter, and Varujan, I follow you on Facebook. And Varujan definitely puts out long form, in depth articles, essentially. And it's worthwhile to listen to two Armenians, both in Armenia and Artsakh, giving their perspective on a daily basis of their expertise. Gev, I don't know if you want to continue a little bit, giving us some insight as to what's going on in Stepanakert and around, or if we should move to a couple questions with Varujan.
So I think that's a preliminary background and some context. I think we can get more into it as the questions develop.
Wonderful. Varujan, we were talking about what's taken place over the last day in Artsakh, and Gev gave us a quick summary of what's taking place on the ground in Artsakh and what the general attacks have been from Azerbaijan. If there's anything specific about what you have been writing about, or the information coming from the Turkish side about the attacks on Berzor, about the smaller attacks elsewhere in Artsakh, if you'd like to give us a little bit of insight as to what you're hearing, both from non-Turkic news as well as the Turkish news that you follow from Azerbaijan as well and Turkey.
Thank you. Well, what we can say for sure it is that the preparation for these attacks and incursions were being made not in the recent days, but it was well planned, because the both on the ground we had news that there are a lot of attempts to transfer parts of the army from inside Azerbaijan to the front lines, to the new front lines, which is a clear evidence that they were preparing something. Another thing is that the rhetoric of the state and different actors on the highest level, starting with the president of Azerbaijan up to the ministers and other personalities, they were, let's say, they were putting openly that their patience is about to over, and they are waiting for concrete steps from the Armenian government, meaning that Armenian government should handle Berdzor and change the road, and also they should quickly take out all the conscripts from Artsakh, and also put Artsakh government in a situation that they have even no army. I mean, even an army fully consisted of the Artsakh resident Armenians. All this was were constantly being repeated by the Azerbaijani government. So this is another evidence. And the third evidence was that in the recent weeks, we have seen so many messages from the Ministry of Defense of Azerbaijan constantly repeating that Armenians violated ceasefire, violated in different parts. So this, which was not true, as we know, Armenian side is never right now is never answering to Azerbaijanis, unfortunately, and so this was another preparation. Let me say it was preparation for the legitimacy of a new attack on Armenian side. And as we have seen yesterday, already the first time ever, by the way, Azerbaijan during all this 30 years of this part of the conflict, they never said openly that they are launching an operation. And yesterday they said that they are launching an operation just without any, any precondition or any, let's say, specific reason. No, we are launching a counter-terroristic operation, and this is our activity. So all this was a good approval that we deal with the prepared operation and prepared politics, and this is definitely part of the more general policy which is being conducted both by Azerbaijan and Turkey, because I mean it's not a secret, and it's not a specific inside information that for them currently there are two main uh, goals, short-term goals on a table. The first one is the full control over Artsakh, which can be done through different methods, starting with the small incursions up to large-scale war, and up to psychological attack on the Armenians living in Artsakh to make them leave Artsakh, up to different other tools and mechanisms. The second, so this is the first goal, and by the way, they are very, very successful in this in many senses. And the second one is definitely to put a lot of pressure to get the so-called sovereign Zangezur corridor through Sunik region, which is much more. Let's say it has more geopolitical effect rather than laws of Artsakh. So here, not only Armenia but also Russia and Iran are somehow involved and part of the negotiations, but still they are putting a lot of pressure. And the military attack is also being prepared on Sunik as well. So in case Armenia's in this case, Armenia's allies are not allowing Turkish and Azerbaijani side to take the corridor with the diplomatic tools, then I'm sure that the military operation shouldn't be excluded as one of the most, let's say, possible options for the Turkish side to take the corridor. So this is the more general context as I can see.
That was very insightful and incredibly dense. There's a few points that you brought up that you mentioned in passing that I think we should focus on. Actually, many points, not just a few. You discussed the response from the Armenian government and the Armenian military has been non-existent. That was one of the points that I'd like to hear from both you and Gev. But let me put a few points out there so that we can all keep it in the back of our minds. You mentioned an incursion on Sunik. You mentioned the Zangezur corridor. I'd like to discuss the goals of Turkey, whether it's to continue the ethnic cleansing of all of Artsakh, or if the current goals are just to seal Artsakh, create an island with Berdzor closed, the Armenian response so far, as well as a few points. But a few other points that I want to get back to that I have notes here on. I'd like to get back to the Armenian response, not just over the past few incursions by the Azeris, but in general. And to that point, um, over the uh, over the past few weeks, over the past few months, you talked about the Berzor corridor. This was something that, if I'm not mistaken, back in June, Nicole confirmed that the Berzor corridor would be handed over. If Gev or Varujan, you could, if we can take a step back and move forward chronologically a little bit, just to set the discussion. How did that happen? When did that happen? And is that something that did happen? I don't think every listener follows the news as closely as some do. So understanding that the current regime in Armenia, the government, the civil contract government, has been essentially complicit in the let's call it demands of the Turks, both to the west and the east, over the past few weeks and leading up to this war. So, if we can talk about those hostilities over the past few weeks that Varujan you started discussing, but mainly, can we talk about this Berzor corridor confirmation, and then also over the last couple of weeks, if I'm not mistaken, the confirmation from the civil contract government that the Armenian armed forces would be removed from Artsakh. These are two big events that I believe led up to where we are today. And if you could give us a little bit more context to those two events, and then if we can move into the rest of the discussion. Thank you. Gev, if you want to discuss these 2 points, I know you've been there, you're following this closely, you're dealing with a lot in Artsakh. If you can tell us specifically about the Berzor discussions and how the Armenian government has been uh, essentially capitulating constantly as we've gone through the days, through the weeks.
So I think I can give some background and context into Berdzor, Lachin, and the Aravnu area, and I believe Varujan could go more in depth about the narratives, or actually the lack of narratives coming out, near total silence coming out of the Armenian government. For about the last month or so, I would say that this has been put on, the front burner of a lot of the talking points and political discussions here in Artsakh. What is the fate of Berzor? What is the fate of Lachin? And I think that has been the reason that those talks have intensified is what Varujan mentioned earlier, that if Azerbaijan cannot come to, uh, you know, uh, I would say not even a diplomatic means, but a conversation around these issues with the government here in Artsakh, that they would be resorting to acts of violence. And we've seen those acts of violence break out in the last few days. This is not, Varujan again mentioned this earlier, this is not something that, happened out of the blue. They have had an entire coordinated campaign around this. I believe they even have a title for it, Operation Revenge or something. And we've seen uh, this is so well prepared that about a week ago, even Azerbaijani channels started circulating talking points and things that they should do when this conversation is launched. I think what's also important to mention is that Aravnu, Berdzor, Lachin, this isn't just a corridor, and I'll go into the importance of this that I touched upon earlier, but this is a place where people are currently living. Aravnu has hundreds of residents, Berdzor has hundreds of residents um, that live there. So this isn't just about them, taking land, but this is also about the expulsion of the ethnic Armenians living there. So it goes hand in hand with, the theme of ethnic cleansing. The I can tell you on the ground that the people of Bedzor and the people of Alavnu are steadfast in the fact that they are going nowhere, that they see this as their homeland, that they see this as their um, where their families live, where they want to build a future here. Um, but I think the most important thing to take away from all of this is the fact that Azerbaijan, whenever it cannot come to any conclusions or definitive results through the negotiating table, they are willing, absolutely willing, to resort to violence. And this goes back into the theme of talking about building peace. All of those narratives, as cute as they sound, they're all false. When Azerbaijan talks about peace building, they're talking about the coercions of the Armenian populace here in Artsakh and getting them to do whatever they want. That is their version of peace. And when they cannot get that, they have proven time and time again, these last few days being the latest reminder, that they will escalate, they will resort to violence, and they will not. Unfortunately, those acts of violence will not be contained within small scrimmages. They will launch, massive acts of aggression. Again, we mentioned that these aren't in the last few years. Yes, we've seen, shootings break out across the line of contact, but for the first time in 2 years, I would say we're seeing the use of UAVs, we're seeing the use of grenade launchers, things that can cause mass casualties. So this is something, unfortunately, the Azerbaijani side is fully committed to. And then, even more unfortunately, this is something that we've heard total silence. And Varujan maybe can go into this, but it's been 3 days that these mass, acts of violence and aggression have been committed upon the people of Artsakh. And for 3 days, we've heard radio silence from the Prime Minister of Armenia, from many of, I would say, the upper echelon of the folks in the government there. A lot of the information that we get here in Artsakh comes from the government of Artsakh, comes from the Artsakh Defense Forces, comes from the representatives of the government here. And that's a really dangerous notion to push, and that's a really, really dangerous hill to go down, because if we're talking about the psychological aspect of this war, the people of Artsakh need to know that, yes, the diaspora is behind them. Yes, the people of Artsakh stand ready, but they have to know that there's a government in Armenia that's willing to protect its interests and willing to protect the interests of the people in Artsakh. Besides that, if Lachin is given away, if Berzor and Aghavnu go, as we mentioned earlier, the lifeline, the artery, where so many resources and so much of the transportation goes on, will be cut off, and Artsakh will, in essence, be completely isolated. So the lack of any sort of talk, any sort of action from the Armenian government is really troublesome. And maybe Varujanjan, you can get into this.
Thank you, Georgian. Yes, exactly. The core point here is that, I mean, there are so many ways to not only solve the situation, but even to not to let it to reach to this point. But the problem is that the Republic of Armenia, with all its resources, is not taking part. It's not participating. It's not in any way engaged in the process of currently Artsakh's protection and Artsakh's future, because openly it was many times said by the current de facto government of the Republic of Armenia, that what we have in Artsakh should be solved through the guarantees of the Russian side. So this is, I mean, if we translate this from the diplomatic language to like common language, it means that, guys, we're not part of this anymore. I mean, we took our forces from there. We are just sending money. So Artsakh is not a political issue, and it has no relevance to the politics of the Republic of Armenia, but rather a social or humanitarian issue. And what we can do here, we'll send money. So I mean, this is the, let's say, the main narrative which we have in the recent months, by the constantly produced and disseminated by the government of the Republic of Armenia. And if we look at the responses, not by the government, as Gev correctly mentioned, no official announcement was made by the government of Armenia. Only one and a small announcement was made by the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs of Armenia, saying that they are somehow, how to say it, they're feeling uncomfortable, something like this, with the situation in Artsakh. And as this is the territory of the responsibility of Russian peacekeeping forces, so they should somehow be active in this. So again, putting responsibility on the shoulders of Russians, not on and taking no responsibility by themselves. Besides this announcement, only we have seen the work of the pro-government, let's say, experts or media manipulators, who were constant. If you look what they have said, starting from yesterday, they said that Berzor and all the other regions are the responsibility area of Russians. So this is happening because of Russians. Again, putting all the responsibility on Russians. Okay, let's think this way. If Russians are responsible for this, okay, this is a point. What Armenia is doing, I mean, okay, Russians are not protecting Armenians in Artsakh. Russians are not protecting Artsakh anymore. Okay, what we should do? We should just somehow fix the situation, or we should only talk about the situation as an outsider. What we see right now is the second option, because, as Gev correctly again mentioned, the current government of Armenia has, ideologically, first of all, has no, um, let's say, feeling towards towards Artsakh. I mean, they don't see Artsakh as a part of Armenia, and this is not a new thing. I mean, you can look at what they have been talking about before being in opposition, before being in the government. Read the articles and the books of of Nikol Pashinyan, of all the cabinet members. The most part of them, the majority of them, they are in line with the former President Levon Petrosyan's ideology that we should give Artsakh to Azerbaijan in order to escape war and conflicts, which is not true, as you know, because Azerbaijan and Turkish side, they are not wanting only to take Artsakh, but rather currently we have Syunik issue, Gerarkunik, and actually the very existence of the political entity called Armenia here in this region is out of the plans of Turkey and Azerbaijan, and this is being constantly articulated on the top level of Turkey and Azerbaijan. So this is the first reason why Armenia's current government is out of these processes, and the second one is another important fact, that uh, we have a capitulated government. It is the same government, the same people, which already once signed a capitulation with Turkey, with Azerbaijan, and now what we see is the somehow continuation of this capitulation, or the preparation for the second document of capitulation of Armenia in front of Azerbaijan. And if you have a capitulation, then definitely you are fulfilling the preconditions put by the winning side. And I'm more than sure that what is being currently discussed about Berzor and all other points, which is being easily handed to Azerbaijan, is part of the already made negotiations. But as the current government is working, it has one aim, to keep the power, to be in power. Then they are not saying this, they are not articulating and communicating this to the population, because it will cost them the power. So what they are doing, they are first of all keeping silence about what's happening, and then on the second or third day, when the grievance, national grievance, is a little bit decreased, they are saying, yes, there's something happened there. And then a week after, they are saying that, yes, what happened is a natural thing, and it should be happened because Azerbaijan otherwise is gonna attack Armenia. So this is a war without announcing a war. This is a capitulation without announcing the capitulation. And it's not surprising that there is no reaction from the Armenia's official side. It's very, very, very predictable thing.
I mean, you bring up uh, an important point where it's this constant capitulation and then justification after the fact for the situation. And Gev, you brought up how Berzor is the artery to Artsakh. Um, a couple of things here I think are related, but if you guys can talk about this a little bit, by one, by removing the armed forces of Armenia from Artsakh, um, and then scapegoating the Russians, or blaming them wholly for the situation at hand. How does that play into the relationship with Russia? Have you guys been keeping up with the Russian news, or what the sentiment of the Russians are in regards to this government, and how Nicole and his people are essentially blaming them at every step for the situation, and by essentially capitulating Bedzor and giving the Armenian population in Alavno and Bedzor and the entire corridor. Does this make the capitulation uh, uh, and the justification for it that much easier after the fact? Barujan, based on what you're telling me, it's a very slow burn that the government is setting up for these for its population, both in Yerevan as well as abroad. It's a I don't know what you're talking about, and then a few days later it's yeah it happened, and then a few days later is we knew this all along. Everyone knew that this was the situation. How does that play into what's currently taking place with Berzor being essentially abandoned? And does that open the door for capitulating all of Artsakh that much more easy? Or is the goal to just, uh, where does this put us? Where does this put this current government? And where does it put the Armenian people in general in regards to this conflict?
Just if I may, I would like to bring one example, a very good one, but I can bring many like this. How we can measure the attitude of the general population about what's happening in Artsakh, as there are so many discussions in the let's say national circles that the reason for all this is the um, the population which is not interested in all what's happening. Yeah, probably you have seen this kind of discussions, and this what we have is the result of tolerance of the population. But this is not true, because how we measure the population's attitude and feelings and worldview is sociological surveys. And I have in my hands 4 recent sociological surveys of the Armenia's population. This is done purely based on the all the scientific methods and required, let's say, on the required quality level. So what we see there, we see that the vast majority of the Armenian population, and when I'm saying vast majority, it means like 85 or in some cases 90 plus percent of the population, they are against giving any piece of land to Azerbaijan. This has been approved by not one sociological research, but at least 4 in the recent 6 months. And done by the way, these researches were conducted by different actors. So I mean, even non national. So what we have the population which really understands the importance of Artsakh, but at the same time, for example, only 40 something percent of the population knows that there has been a meeting between Aliyev, Pashinyan, and Charles Michel back in April, where the status of Artsakh was actually changed to not to be a part of Azerbaijan, to be part of Azerbaijan, which it was actually one of the main triggers when we had people on the streets. So at least half of the population, they are not aware what happened. So this is why we have so many let's say difficulties with calling people to action, be it to be on the streets, on the social media, or anywhere else, because one of the main problems of the national forces in Armenia, in diaspora, to it's currently it's impossible, not impossible, but we are not managing to break the information vacuum which is being created by the government. You have problem with Berzor? Check how many people knows about that, because the main traffic, the main information outlets, they are in the hands of the government, and the government is saying no, nothing happened, nothing serious happened. So you can like feel the positive vibe on the streets. People are talking about many other issues because this is what is the reality. So don't be surprised of this. What we really need is this kind of discussions to be widespread and not to be encircled within these circles, but rather to be part of the wider public. And I'm very happy that 301 is one of the outlets which is trying to do that. So this is very, very important. And that's why government still has, in some cases, positive image, or at least neutral image, because they, through their like media empire, which consists of official media, of television stations, of electronic publications, and even the so-called bullshit media or fake news media. They are controlling the general narrative in the country, and this narrative is not reflecting the reality. But the reality is that we had the war yesterday in Artsakh with 2 at least losses and so many casualties. If we check today how many people knows about that, I can say that this is gonna be a very, very low number. So this was my initial point, and probably Gab will go to the other parts of your question.
And Barujan, I think the point you make about information and news is so much more important than most people realize, and I think that's part of the goal of 301. But I don't know if that's if we should expand on that in this discussion at this point or later on in this discussion. But what you're saying is that in Armenia, when people are watching Hameg or they're watching Azadutun, or the various other stations that are controlled by the government, or I guess foreign governments, in Azadutun's case, The gravity of the situation in Artsakh and in Berdor and in Sunik and in Gearkunik is not being discussed. Or if it's being discussed, it's being dismissed or diminished.
You mean it's being diminished? You're asking, or
I'm saying it's really a lack of information and general ignorance by the population because of the news media coverage in Armenia,
yeah,
as well as the diaspora. I don't think
yeah. That's
personally, I don't
exactly.
think this is limited to Armenia. I believe us in the diaspora have the same situation, just through different media companies. So uh, the lack of knowledge and the lack of information as to what's actually taking place, from what you're
Exactly.
saying, what I'm gathering is a major cause for the uh, I don't want to call it indifference and apathy, but I can't think of a better word for it at this moment. And what you're saying is in Yerevan, in Armenia proper. I doubt it's as bad in Artsakh just because they're living this.
Yeah.
Uh, but in Yerevan and Armenia proper, the lack of information is part of the issue.
Definitely, it's part of the issue, and actually it is the issue. Ignorance, which is widely being discussed in national circles, is not a result of the natural, let's say, attitude and position of the Armenian population, but it's really a result of a work constantly being conducted by the government to manipulate the situation and to manipulate the population. Remember what happened during the war, when the capitulation document was already being discussed from at least from 5th of November, what we know from the official Russian sources. But even on the eve of the announcing the capitulation, Nikol Pashinyan was officially putting on Facebook that battle for Shushi is continuing, though it has already been agreed that Shushi is going to be handled. And around 800 or 700 people at least died during the last day in Shushi, because it was like important to say that Shushi is still ours. Otherwise, he was gonna be, I mean, taken out of of his chair. So this is one of the reasons. But of course, this is another discussion why we have this ignorance. How we can work with this, what should be done. And I already mentioned, 301 is one of the sources which works with this in this direction, and I'm very happy to what you guys are doing. The general context. To put, you also asked about the Russia side, if I'm not mistaken, that why Russians are not operating correctly. Am I right or not? Because you had
I was asking what this wholesale washing or the hands, Armenia washing its hands of Artsakh, and then
Mhm.
blaming Russia for it. What is the sentiment on Russia's side, and
Yeah,
what is currently
yeah,
taking place in the relations between the two because of that?
yeah. That's a very important question. Russian side has its own goals being here. I mean, this is very clear. Russia sees South Caucasus as one of the its own zones of influence, an important one, and it has its own, let's say, understanding of the importance of the region. And one of the main pillars here for the Russian policy is to be able to work with at least Azerbaijan and Armenia. I mean, if it's possible to keep Azerbaijan, then it should work to keep Azerbaijan. And of course, it's not a good point for us, but this is the reality of what we have. What we can do as a part of this great game in South Caucasus, we should strengthen our relations with Russia as far as possible, but at the same time work on the direction to weaken Azerbaijani-Russian relations, which is, by the way, doing Azerbaijan vice versa. I mean, Azerbaijan works constantly, and it worked before the war to weaken Armenian-Russian relations. And they were, in some cases, they were very, very successful. So, what is Russia currently trying to do? Having a major battlefield in Ukraine and having several other hotspots currently around its border, it puts priorities. The number one priority is Ukraine. Number two priority is Belarus. Number three priority is Central Asia. Number four priority is South Caucasus, as we can judge based on how they react to the events and processes in this all these regions. So they are trying to escape direct confrontation with Azerbaijani side, and when we are saying Azerbaijani side, it means with the Turkish side. Because it has other priorities, and these priorities require all the resources which Russia has, and these resources are not unlimited as it is being depicted in the Armenian pro-Western circles. They are restricted, as for any power, by the way. When U.S. was preparing its invasion into Iraq, it wasn't done alone. It tried to U.S. tried to collect a coalition of forces to enter that, because war is always the very, very difficult thing. So for Russia, they are trying to somehow keep the situation silent here, in order not to be in a situation when they have to put here resources, new forces, ammunition, and other things, and to be in direct confrontation with Turkey, which is situational. This is important. Situational partner of Russia currently, because it tries to gain something from Russia being a neutral side, as it done, by the way, during the Second World War as well. So from their perspective, imagine you are sitting in Moscow and you are looking at the map and you have war in a large scale war in Ukraine, and confrontation in Serbia, a confrontation in Kazakhstan, in between Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, and you have South Caucasus, and Azerbaijanis are taking a small hill near village of Nareshtar in Artsakh. For them, this is nothing. I mean, for us, this is, as Gav mentioned in the beginning, every piece of our land is sacral. It's important for us, and it has an important influence on the general situation on front line. But from the Moscow perspective, it's just a hill which can be handled, as far as this is solving another major problem, which is not to give an escalation. And these small solutions are always being done based on the weak side, on the interest of the weak side, not on the strong side. I mean, if Azerbaijanis are saying that we need this hill, we need this piece of land, the Armenian side, which is currently is being represented only by the Artsakh government, not the Armenian government. Azerbaijanis are saying, otherwise we're gonna open fire. Russians are saying, okay, we'll talk with Armenians. You will have this hill, and they are saying to Armenians that, guys, otherwise you are gonna lose everything. So give this to them. And this is the way how it is being solved.
It sounds like a very slippery slope, because you can use that excuse for taking any part of land of Armenia all the way to Yerevan.
That's the strategy of Azerbaijan, by the way.
It seems to be working. And Barujan, I want to make sure that we are taking consideration of your time. Do you have a few more minutes with us, or
I have 20 minutes. I have 20 minutes.
You have 20 minutes. Okay, I just wanted to set that expectation in the room. So there are a few things that I do want to discuss. Some of it having to do with the defenses of the Armenians, but also I want to talk about some of the internal issues. You talked about information, and you talked about the lack of information, and I think that's a whole other topic. But one of the things that has been taking place that I've been reading about lately is the internal issues of Armenia in regards to its own citizenry, and I think this ties into Artsakh uh, um, uh, very much. Um, Armen Grigoryan recently died in captivity as a political prisoner. We have Chalabian, who was just released and then is back in prison again. We have many different mayors, opposition, youth activists, and Gev, I'd like to hear from you a little bit too. Maybe we can talk about this a little bit more at the end when Varjan has to leave. But what is these people who are being imprisoned? Their goal and their efforts are not geared towards different civil issues. It almost seems like all of these people are trying to actively educate the community on what's taking place in Artsakh and what the current regime is doing in regards to Artsakh. And it seems like those are the voices that are being silenced. They're being imprisoned. They're being held in pre-trial detention. They're essentially dying in pre-trial detention, as we saw. I used to follow Mr. Grigorian regularly. I couldn't understand his Russian videos on YouTube, but more than half of his videos were in Armenian, and he was a great resource of information. But what is taking place in regards to the information of Armenia, uh, but having to do with these political prisoners, the youth, the activists, the community leaders? It just seems like there's a wholesale silencing of anyone who's an activist in Yerevan, in Armenia, at this point. And Gev, I'd like to hear from you a little bit more, but maybe Varujan, you can start this discussion. As well as backing diaspora leaders. So, I mean, just recently, and sorry to cut you off, Arjan, I mean, we've been seeing people from the diaspora going to Armenia and not being allowed into the airport, essentially, into Armenia. How does this tie into what's taking place with the general capitulation of the sovereign Armenia and
Yeah, thank you, Ara, for the question. This is very again important because it touches to the another, let's say, main discussions inside Armenia's public from 2020, when people are saying that we're against Nikol, we're against this government, but we need the third power, a new power to follow and to support it. Avetik Chalabian, you mentioned. Avetik Chalabian is a good example of that. I know him personally, by the way. He's I mean, a professional businessman, negotiator who made his business outside of Armenia. So, I mean, no corruption, nothing else. He then returned to Armenia, repatriated, opened his own foundation, worked with the previous government, with the current government on strengthening the front lines, putting some techniques and technologies on the preservance of the front line, and supporting several other non-political initiatives. So this is the general image of Avetik. What happened in 2020 made Avetik to be part of the politics, and he said that, okay, I'm going to open my own party, I'm going to work with this, trying to be a new power center of power. So I'm going to be active in the politics, and using very, let's say, strict, but at the same time very user-friendly, let's say, rhetorics. I mean, I'm using the word capitulation and capitulants. He is not using that words. I mean, so in this sense, he is a pure image of the new age of politicians who saying that they failed and why they failed. So I'm coming to make this work. So Avetik Chalabian is being prosecuted. He is a political prisoner, as you have seen, because even the prosecutor asked not to take him to the prison, but rather just to continue to work with him when he is in freedom. But the judge already with the prepared decision said no, he's going to jail. So this is very important because it shows that in case of any power, in case of any personality who tries to be a real opposition to the current government, then the government is not gonna make an easy path for this person or the power. They are gonna somehow restrict his possibilities, put it in the jails, or even make him or her out of the country, because any power which somehow challenges the current government, then they are gonna be punished for that. So this is a very symbolic act to anybody who has some political ambitions and the real is in a real opposition towards the current government. What about diaspora Armenians? This is also very symbolic, but very systematic. I mean, the systematic process is not to give anybody who is in a real opposition, who is in a mobilizational power, be it in Armenia or in diaspora, work easily and freely against the government. If you are taking several important icons, like in the case of two renowned members from of Dash Action Party from France and Belgium, you are first of all not giving them an opportunity to work because they are prominent people. I mean, both Masis and Murat are important personalities, an organization, let's say, activists who can mobilize people around them. And this is not only against them but also showing to others who can have or who have ambition to be active in this field. This is a symbolic message to them not to be active, because otherwise you are at least going to be abandoned to enter to Armenia. In the worst case scenario, you can be jailed or something like that. So this is the system and this is the message. And I'm more than sure that this was also discussed with the Turks as well during the so-called negotiations, because uh, Turkish side was always trying to keep out of Armenia those diaspora activists who were like real fighters against Turkey for the Armenian genocide recognition and generally for Artsakh in Armenia. So I'm more than sure that this issue was being brought by Turks, and this is a fulfillment of the secret preconditions, one of the secret preconditions by the Armenian capitulated government in front of the Turks.
Thank you, Varujan. Gev, I don't know if you want to add a little bit to that, based on your relationship with the ANC, as well as some of the diasporan Armenians who are being banned from entering. I mean, the most recent were two people from the Abrahamian family, Masis and Sune. Before that from France, and I don't foresee this being the final uh, uh, people being banned from entering Armenia. My understanding is this started as early as 2019 with someone I've followed, also Andranik Ovanesyan, who I believe is in exile in Kazakhstan right now. But the point is that this government has been utilizing access into the country, or withholding access into the country, to silence essentially diasporan leaders or leaders within Armenia. And Gev, I don't know if you have any insight to add to that.
I'll just be quick on this point. I think looking at it from a holistic perspective, yes, like this weighs a little more heavier on some of us, because both Masis, who leads the ANC in Holland, and Murat Papazian, who's been a leading figure there in the ANC, who has very close ties to the French government, to Emmanuel Macron, the president there. This is concerning, not just because it's folks that are closely related to our family of organizations, but another aspect that we have to look at this from is these folks that are not being led into the country are not being led in with the illusion of some national security concern or whatever this is, and the NSS, National Security Service of Armenia, which is supposed to be monitoring the borders, which is supposed to be monitoring threats like grey wolves and Turkish nationalists coming into Armenia, is more preoccupied with diasporans that are coming into the country, and not just any diasporans. They're not coming there for tourism. They're not coming to visit. They're not coming to tend to the nightlife in Yerevan, but these are folks that are coming to give in and put into the well-being of the nation, and they have proven track records through decades of doing this type of work. Even on the youth level, Sune Abrahamian, who tried to come into the country, many folks might not know, but she was coming to volunteer for over a month running youth camps in Sunik. So someone has to ask the question: what is the Armenia's National Security Service doing, focusing on youth volunteers coming into the country, when currently right now the topic of conversation is the incursions into Armenian and Artsakh soil. But we're preoccupied with a lot of that other stuff. And for those folks that have been beating on this false solution and this false facade of democracy for 4 years, is there any constitutional, in Armenia's constitutional law, is there any precedent that would allow for an Armenian to not be led into the country? And mind you, these are not just French or nationalists from the Netherlands. These are also, some of these folks carry dual citizenship. So they're entitled to the laws that protect the Armenian citizenry. And all of that is being put aside specifically for political gain.
And to Varujan's point, I believe the only precedent for this was during Levante Petrosyan, when essentially the same tactics were used to silence opposition voices early on, post the Artsakh liberation, which I think is incredibly concerning, given the situation today.
Yeah, ideologically, they are very close. I mean, the current government and Levante Petrosyan's government, they are not only close ideologically, but many of the former Levante Petrosyan team members are part of this team, or they, at least their sons or daughters, they are definitely bearers of this ideology.
I think that says a lot about what's been taking place. And again, I don't know if this is understood by the majority of people, or if this is something that is less known. The point being that there's a vacuum of information for some reason with the general population of Armenians in the diaspora, as well as in Armenia. Maybe it has more to do with lack of concern, but I believe those things are intertwined. And again, we can talk about those things at a different time. Varujan, I believe we only have a few minutes left with you. Um, the Artsakh, again, today, as we're talking right now, there's currently, I wouldn't even call it a skirmish. It's active war and ethnic cleansing of Berzor. The defenses of Armenia and the military buildup, and the scapegoating of previous governments. We haven't seen anything, at least in my view, and please correct me, Gev or Varujan. Have we seen any military buildup in terms of equipment or systems since the 2020 war? In 2016, we knew that drone warfare was where the Artsakh conflict essentially was going. My understanding from listening to previous Armenian generals was that those systems and equipment that's necessary to have the anti-drone warfare defenses were ordered for whatever reason. We can get into those discussions later. They didn't exist in 2020. Now that the Nachkins, the previous government card, has been utilized in 2020, and that we have complete control of the Armenian military and the direction of the Armenian military by this civil contract regime. Um, what steps have they taken to strengthen the anti-drone efforts of Artsakh, of Armenia? Because there's many different systems, whether it's the Pantsir, the Osa, the Belladonna, all the things that somehow everyone became experts on during the first, the 2020 Artsakh War, the third one technically. Um, what of that has been implemented so far? Because what we're seeing for the past day is active drone warfare and just decimation of Armenian posts. Again, using loitering drones with munitions. Has anything been done? Has what this government whatever they've been saying, has any of it been implemented, or again, is it just is it just doublespeak? They're saying one thing and they're actually doing something else.
I'm not a specialist in military affairs, so I'm not very sure about the details of the procurement or other stuff. But what I can say based on, again, government policy, it is that the goal is not to keep the front line or strengthen the army, but just the opposite, because the government official program is about to decrease the number of conscripts, or and finally to reach to the so-called professional army, which is another manipulating wording used by the government, because they are saying that we should have a professional army. It sounds very great, but it means not a huge army which is professional, but rather only to have contract-based army, which is a very, very small number. And it's impossible to have contract-based army in Armenia and keep the front line and provide the security of Armenia's borders, because before it was impossible. Now you have at least twice longer front line, which should be kept, which should be really fully constructed from zero. But instead of that, you are putting, restrictions on the army conscripts number, and saying that you are gonna cut, or at least gradually cut the number of conscripts. So what they want is to sign something called peace agreement with Azerbaijan and Turkey, and not have an army, but have like just 10,000 people to keep inside the country, as we have seen in Georgia. By the way, this is actually just the same what happened in Georgia after the so-called Rose Revolution with Saakashvili. In case of Armenia, this is gonna have other more dramatic influences, because threats from Azerbaijan and Turkey, they are still there, and they are gonna be there, and they are gonna be much more dangerous than they are right now. So we are
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the threat of ethnic cleansing and war for Georgia is not the same for Armenians and their neighbors.
not at the same level, let's say.
That's very, very interesting. Varujan, I know you have to leave. I believe this discussion
Yes, thank
will
you.
probably go for a few more hours with just a few more questions, but we will likely continue doing this. Hopefully, the The attacks on Bedzor are not going to continue escalating, but um, uh, hopefully this comes to a faster and more favorable end than what it seems to be. But Varujan, next time we can continue some of these other questions and give also. I do want to hear a little bit more next time as to what's taking place in Stepanakert through the ANC there. Um, and yeah, I just want to be
Thank you.
thoughtful of your time, Varujan.
Arajan, thank you, and to the all staff of 301. I just want to say to your audience that our NGO Armenian Project is gonna be again with a series of lectures in the US in the September and October. So there is another opportunity to talk about all this issue there in West Bank at least.
I appreciate that. And everyone, again, please follow 301, follow Gev, follow Varujan, and Hi Alik, which is Varujan, before you leave, if you want to give a little bit more on what Hi Alik is and what you guys are doing and when you started it and how, an outro.
Yeah, thank you. Hi Alik, hialik.com with Q is an one media project initiative by our NGO. It tries to be an electronic journal concentrating, focusing on the most important issues for the Armenians in Armenia, putting not news but rather comments on news. And we have podcast which discusses the weekly events with commentaries. We have analysis. We have explanatory materials about Berzor, by example, for example, which is translated by 301 generously. We launched the English version as well, which is mostly supported by 301. So, we're trying to really make an qualified, high quality electronic journal on the most important issues. So this is not supported by any party or any any personality. This is all full fundraised. So we are really trying to put our best expertise in this. And if you follow, we'll be very thankful. Thank you.
Yes, everyone, please follow. And I do want to leave some time for questions. So once Varujan leaves, I'd like to field a couple of questions for Gev or myself. But Varujan, I really appreciate your time. I believe I speak on
Thank
behalf
you, guys. Thank
here.
you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gevjan. Be careful there. Astvat vetat.
Thank you, Varujan. We're going to be good.
I did see a couple hands earlier during the discussion. I wanted to see if there are any specific questions about what's taking place, about the things leading up to this, or if we should leave the questions and discussion for another discussion on a different day. If there are any questions, please raise your hand. Otherwise, Gev, if there's anything you want to be continuing to discuss specifically about what you're doing and what's taking place in Artsakh, we can continue there. Otherwise, we can call it a night for now.
Unless there's any questions, I think it's important to end off on the note we spoke about narratives or lack thereof. I think that how we frame what happens today, what happened yesterday, what may happen moving forward is going to be vitally important for us. Ara, you asked the question of is this about Azerbaijan taking a simple road, or the Lachin corridor, or does it have to do with the existence of Artsakh? The answer is both, and they work in hand, and Azerbaijan understands this very well. If Artsakh is to lose the Lachin corridor, if they are to lose Berdzor and Aghavnu, they are in effect going to be isolated. And this will in effect contribute to, and this is what Azerbaijan is hoping, the complete isolation and the freezing out of Artsakh, not just to Armenia, but to the rest of the world. And what they're hoping to do with this is to isolate Artsakh, to encourage more people to leave. And their ultimate goal is not just about Berdzor and Lachin. Their ultimate goal is the depopulation of Artsakh, of all Armenians. It is the complete ethnic cleansing of the people living here. So we have to be incredibly vigilant. It's already very tough for the people here in Artsakh to live within the realities that exist today. It is going to be much, I won't say impossible, but it is going to be so much harder to do so when they are effectively cut out, where their only transport route is cut off. There will be socioeconomic implications. There will be implications to IDPs, the displaced people, and it will increase the fears and the isolationism that exists here today. The reason that the soldiers are giving their lives on the front lines today is because they understand that very well. This isn't about land, just land. Land is incredibly important. Without it, we don't have a nation. But this is a systemic, concerted, and very planned out course of events that Azerbaijan is hoping will lead to the extinction of the Armenians here in Artsakh.
Thank you for that, Giv. Also, what I've been reading, and I could be wrong, but the alternative road that they keep discussing, it's outside of the standard the Berdzor corridor that Armenia and Artsakh have been connected through. And something that we saw with Artsakh over the past year is whether it's water, whether it's the energy, whether it's gas, with the Azeris between uh, uh, those resources and the people of Artsakh, the Armenians of Artsakh, we've seen how they've been able to manipulate the access to energy, the access to water, the access to gas, where they essentially just turn off the spout whenever they want. Um, by removing Armenians from where the infrastructure lies, I do believe that um, we're going to be setting ourselves up if we are to lose the Berdzor corridor for a much more problematic future when it comes to the access to just standard necessities in Artsakh, regardless of us having a road to it or not. I don't think having a replacement road is going to be as clean cut and easy as the current government, as well as Azerbaijan's mirrored talking points are. But understanding that the infrastructure for Artsakh does not go through some new road for the past few decades, but it has been going through the existing Berdzor corridor, I believe is something that's very problematic.
And it's important to keep in mind that that road that they're claiming is to be used as an alternative is a road that is going to be under, if not direct Azeri supervision, but literally within the confines of the areas that they control. So who is to say that at any point, once we do switch to that road, if we do switch to that road, that the same way that they cut off gas here, the same way that they cut off electricity, because so many of our power grids go through them, so many of our gas and water lines go through territories that they've currently occupied. Who's to say that any time that they can't close the road? And then who's also to say that Armenians, diasporans, people that come into Artsakh, that give into the economy, that help out, and the Artsakhis that rely on transportation back and forth, who's to say that road isn't going to be cut off on a whim anytime that Azerbaijan wants to? This isn't some clean cut transfer of roads. This is about putting the transportation infrastructure in the hands or under the eye of Azeri control, and that's absolutely detrimental.
Precisely. Thank you, Gav. Thank you, everyone. I believe those who didn't know what's going on in Berzor today have a little bit more insight. I believe the gravity of the situation of losing Avno and just the general Berzor corridor is a little better understood. There's a lot that we could be talking about when it comes to lack of information or what type of information people are consuming. But we can leave that for a different time. I don't want to set fatigue in a hour and a half long conversation. There's a lot of topics that can go on for many hours. But I appreciate, on behalf of 301, I appreciate everyone listening in. Please follow 301. Please follow Gev Skadjan, as well as Varujan Geramian and Hayalik. And I look forward to speaking with you all again.